From One of One Production Studios, broadcasting from NYC, you are listening to Unexpected Success with your host, Joy.
Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Unexpected Success with Joy. In the studio today, we have Matthew Haly. I don't even know how to introduce you, Matthew. Well, welcome.
What's up?
What's up? Oh, God. Okay.
Let me just start by saying that I do have some color to my skin.
A little bit. Like a couple drips, right?
A little drop, a little drop.
So Matthew Haly is a founder and creator of the Furniture Joint down in I guess Soho.
We started in the East Village, and then we moved to Soho, and then to the Bronx, and then I just blew it up.
Okay, and you have every right to blow it up, right? Because it's yours,
Yes.
right? So, and he's also been a co-host on HGTV. He's been a contributor to Domino Magazine, but he's been in the design industry for 17 years. So we're so happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So I got to tell you a story. Okay, so a time long, long ago, I
How far back are we going here?
10 years ago.
Okay.
I personally, I had left my last corporate job, and I was like, confused and didn't know what I wanted to do. And some kind of way I fell upon the Furniture Joint, and then you guys were giving classes. There was a interior design class and also an upholstery class, and I decided to sign up. And it was great because I met the two great people. I met you, obviously Matthew, and I met Claudia Callis.
Correct, yes.
And Claudia is a
Great designer.
A great designer based in New York. And I had to tell you, I had the most fun ever in your class, because Matthew was the kind of he's such a man's man. He would throw nails in his mouth and literally have nails in his mouth and spit them out and then hammer the nail into the poof and be like, this is how you got to do it. And I'm like, you want me to put a nail in my mouth? But I still have the poof that I made with you. Was that a
Really?
poof?
Are you kids use
No,
them?
my kids are on the poof. Everyone loves the poof. I wish I had. I'm going to take a picture of the poof and put it on IG so people know that I made this with you.
There's a lot of them out there.
Yeah, I'm sure.
That was I think I did that that version of the series for about 7.5 years. So there's a lot of poofs out there.
Oh man, and we actually picked our fabric and we built it from scratch. So really awesome class. So anyway, that's how I came to know Matthew, and I bumped into you in the street last week, and I'm like, oh my God. So tell us more about you, and how you're a serial entrepreneur. How'd you get started?
Yeah, I mean, I think it pretty much started from the fact that I'm an unemployable person.
Okay, that's honest.
Just, you have to, when you get hired, you have to be able to get along with people, and that's not really my forte. I'm good one-on-one, but when there's a group of people and I don't really have time for sort of chit-chat. I'm very sort of straight to the point, and if you're a chit-chatter, we probably won't get along so well. It's
But you talk, how many people were in our class? Maybe 15, 20 people? You were great.
Yeah,
you're straightforward,
but I
though.
was kind of let's move along with this. Let's get this going. I mean,
Right.
the class was, there were times that the class was an interesting thing, because we would get people, we'd get a group of people in there, and if they all got along, then it was an awesome series.
Right.
But I would get people in there, and at times they wouldn't get along, and then they'd start arguing with each other and criticizing each other, and it turned into a bit of a
that wasn't my series.
they
I wish that was
say,
my
shit
series.
show.
I'm like, hey, turn up.
Yeah. But it led to a lot of things. I did a book for Random House that out of that series, out of the class.
Wow. Wait, and what's the name of your book?
It's called Matthew Haly's Book of Upholstery Tips, Tricks, and Techniques. And so there was some positive things, and the business, the business was good for the most part. I was able to get the show out of the business, so there was a lot of positive things out of it.
Right.
But talking about sort of being an entrepreneur, I don't know if I would necessarily say I'm an entrepreneur. I would say that I'm a person that, again, is unemployable. So you have to pay your bills. So how do you do that? You
Right.
know? And I grew up in New Zealand on a farm, and my dad was very frugal, and so when we had work, he bought an old farmhouse that was run down, and when he did that, there was some things that he could do and some things that he couldn't do. So he would hire people to come to the house, but he would only pay them enough for them and not for their helpers, because he would tell them that he had a son at home that would be the helper. So I did everything from
Wow.
laying pavements to roofing to shearing sheep.
Wow. All right. So
I was
wait.
doing
So
everything.
I'm not sure if you guys caught this. So Matthew's from New Zealand. I don't know anything about New Zealand besides that, you hear about how beautiful it is, how green it is. So can you tell us more about where you're from? So you're from New Zealand. Born and raised.
I was
in-
actually born in Canada, and I lived there till I was 6 years old. And then my parents immigrated to New Zealand, and I grew up there till I was 15 years old. And I grew up on a farm. So
on a farm. That's just like,
we had like an acre of land, but then around us was a much bigger farmer, and we helped him out on his farm, and he had sheep and cows, and we had on our property we had apple trees and orange trees and sheep and chickens and
dude, who are you? That's just, okay, I'm from Queens, right? So I don't.
Right.
It's like that's just so.
You got chickens
fun.
out there.
Plenty of chickens of a different breed, right? But I guess, how did you end up in New York? Because you've been in New York now for how long?
Oh, it's a good 20 years.
20 years.
Yeah.
So take us through that. So you were on a farm, and then
Yeah, so basically I left home when I was about 15 years old. And I
you
moved to
left home
Australia.
at 15. Okay, so
Yeah.
what happened to school? Were you in school, not in school? How does the school work in New Zealand?
Well, first of all, it's school is different than here. Here, everybody needs to go to university, and they have to get a degree, and they have to become lawyers or whatever.
Right.
In New Zealand, if you left school at 15 and got an apprenticeship as a plumber or a mechanic, that was as good. And to be honest with you, in New York, if you can work with your hands, you're pretty much always going to have work. Because for the most part, people in New York can't work with their hands. They grew up in apartments. They're not accustomed to working with their hands, and they hire people to do all these things. So all these people come from other countries that our present president's trying to get rid of,
Right.
who are actually doing all these jobs that nobody. If everybody that came here that worked with their hands was removed, this place would fall apart.
So this is so interesting, and I want to kind of go down this path a little bit. I think because to a large degree, having grown up in New York, working with your hands was never really valued, right? Being creative is not really as valued, quite honestly, as I could going to school for forever and studying something you don't really care about, right? So
Right.
I'm a perfect example of that. So I just, I think that there's so much value in that, and I hope the audience is kind of taking this in, that there's a lot of value in manual labor. A, B, it's valued. C, if you're really good at something, you should pursue it, because I feel like Matthew said, you will always be employed, right? You'll always be able to
Yes.
find work.
Yes.
But I think to a large degree, people are trying to write business plans, and when they're just really good at something else, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's I don't want to be a Debbie Downer as far as America goes, but they have a very different outlook on things. And if we named somebody that worked with their hands as opposed to manual labor, if we named it some fantastic name,
Right.
then suddenly it would
Skilled worker.
even that
No?
worker's not good. If it was something like I don't know, design and build specialist.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, oh right, yeah, that,
I'm a design and build specialist, right.
And to your point, how many people go to college? It's ridiculous that at 18, 19, 20 years old, you have to decide at that point what you want to do for the rest of your life. How many people do you know that go and study for 3, 4, 6 years and don't work in that field?
90%.
Thank you.
Right.
It's a ridiculous way that we have organized our lives and our society.
Well, when you know how America is set up, and just in terms of, wanting people to take out student loans, so that, granted, it's a whole system, right?
Yes.
So you realize the economics behind making kids think they have to go to college and have to spend, take loans, and keeping us in debt, and
Yeah.
you keep us where you need us to be.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you realize the whole economics behind it.
So, I mean,
right?
I'll tell you a quick story. There's a friend of mine from years ago in New Zealand that left school when he was 15. He got an apprenticeship as a plumber, and in 4 years became a plumber. Over the next 10 years of his life, he ended up starting his own company. He owned, I think, around about 6 properties, and didn't do a lick of school, left when he was 15 years old. And then I think when he was about 37, 38 years old, he died of cancer. It's like, just
Right.
look at that scenario and be
Right.
like, why are we fighting to spend all this time in college? Like, you have to follow where your path leads you.
Right.
And, and so when I say I don't really... we have this thing in America where we feel like everybody wants to be a musician, everybody wants to be a superstar, everybody wants to be
Celebrity.
a celebrity, and I don't really subscribe to this thought process that everybody has, where if you just work hard enough, you can be anything and be anyone. That's not true. That is a total
So you don't
falsity.
believe that? Okay.
Absolutely.
So what do
I
you
was a
believe?
musician. I had 4 albums out. I worked from the age of 19 to 28. I worked consistently on my musical career. I know that I'm not Jason Mraz.
Right.
It doesn't matter how long I work at being a musician. I will never be Jason Mraz.
Right.
It's just,
But was there a lane where you could just be Matthew Haly? You know what I mean? Like where you could just kind of like make your mark.
that lane doesn't pay your bills.
Right.
And so that's
Which
what
is
it boils
important.
down to,
Right. Yeah.
And so there's, my son is into football, wants to be in the NFL. I'm not going to crush that dream. Great, go for it. But that's like winning the lottery.
Right.
There's only a certain amount of teams and only a certain amount of players, and there is a lot of killer kids playing football, and there's always somebody that's better than you.
Right.
And you can work as hard as you want at something that does not mean that you will just
End up
because
there.
yes.
But you
because-
never know, like what, on that path, he may end up meeting someone else that, he ends up becoming their agent or ends up still being involved in football, right? In some
Yes.
capacity.
But
But
if-
maybe he won't be the one on the field.
True enough, but if but so then my point still remains the same.
Right.
Just because you are working as hard as you possibly can does not mean that you will become. There's a billionaire and Andre Agassi's out there
Right.
that went to camp, whose parents put him in camp from the time he was in nappies, and didn't become a tennis player.
What's a nappy?
Whatever you call, I don't know. You know what I mean?
Diapers?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
Diaper, yeah.
Love it. I had to tease you on that.
Yeah. So, and they didn't become Andre Agassi.
Right.
For every
No.
Andre Agassi,
No, it's so
there's
true.
thousands of.
So what do you? So question. So I know that you have 2 children. So
Yes.
So what are you saying to them, and just in terms of how they pursue their dreams and how they accomplish what they want to accomplish in life? Are you going to push them towards university? Or are you going to kind of push them towards? I mean,
I'm not pushing them anyway.
You're not pushing.
I'm
them.
letting them do their own path. I'm trying to be a supportive parent in the path that they choose.
And is that what
and
your
that-
parents did for you? Did they?
No.
Okay. So wait. All right. So I'm sorry.
I
And-
left home when I was 15.
So yeah, let's go back there. So you left home at 15, and what did you do at 15 years old? Where'd you go?
I told my parents I was going on a vacation with a friend, and I never went back. And the
crazy.
first job that I did was, so I'd already left school at that point. You asked me about school, and so there's plenty of people that go to school. I was, you're probably not familiar with this term, but I was expelled from school. Okay. So, and my dad was like, all right,
Right.
you know what? That's enough.
Right.
You do what you want to do.
That wasn't the first time you were expelled.
Well, no, I wasn't expelled from the previous school. I was asked to leave in a gentler way.
Right.
School might not be your path.
Right.
A lot of
Okay.
parent-teacher conferences.
Right. Oh God. I'm
So,
sure.
anyways,
you love those.
I left school. My dad was like, "All right, that's it. Obviously, this isn't for you." He'd put away a lot of money, for college and everything. I don't know where that went, but back in the day, I think that was kind of disappeared.
Right,
It's
right.
like insurance.
And
you
do you
know?
have any siblings?
I do have an older sister who's a nurse. She became a nurse, and then I have a younger brother who's he's off the grid. To put it that way.
Okay.
So anyway, I got a job working in an upholstery company. And I sat for.
So were you still in New Zealand?
Yeah, I was in New Zealand. I was
Okay.
basically sat on a stool for 2 weeks straight, 8 hours a day, sanding legs of stools.
Holy cow!
It was the worst.
And where were you sleeping? So
No, I was at home at that point.
Oh, okay.
And then I told my parents I was going on vacation. I went to Australia, and I had no intention of going back. And I got a job working in a glass company, making frames and putting window panes into frames that would then eventually go into buildings.
Wow.
And I did that for a few years. And at that point, I decided that music was what I wanted to do. And so I moved back to Toronto.
Okay.
And I rented an apartment that had a piano in it. And I started learning to play piano.
So you literally, did you go out with the intention of renting a place that had a piano in it? Like,
did I go out with the intention? I don't know if that was the intention, but when I saw the apartment had a piano, I was like, this is amazing.
Right,
And the landlord was leaving it there. I'm like, yeah, this is great. And so then I started pursuing that, and that became my passion for many, many years.
all right, so that's your passion, and you're doing that. And so you're producing, or like, what are you doing? Are you actually, so you're a musician. So do you sing?
Well, I was a musician.
Okay.
I mean, I'm still a musician in the sense of I still play.
And you still create, right?
Yeah, but I'm not out playing and doing those types of things. That the music industry has changed drastically as far as how it's delivered to you and how it's created these days. I'm old school instrument,
So
piano,
when
guitar.
you were going out and playing gigs, what were you playing?
I played guitar and sang, and I had a band.
Oh,
that
you
backed
sang.
me
Do you
up,
want to
yes.
bless us right now with a little bit of?
Let me think about that. Yeah, that'll be a no. But thanks for asking.
I tried.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you're in Toronto. You're a musician. You're going out. You're getting gigs. Are you paying the bills? Is that paying the bills?
I actually started. So I was basically playing anywhere and everywhere, and it didn't necessarily pay the bills. It paid enough money for me to record and do more things in the music industry, but it wasn't paying the bills. Although I did get some grants from some Canadian organizations that help musicians and so on and so forth. But I was actually working with kids in like detention centers and at group homes. Yeah.
You understood those. You understood those kids perfectly.
Yeah.
You can get through, right?
Yeah. Yes. But, that's also one of those things where if they're not committed to change, there's really nothing you can do.
Of course.
You're just
But
there
at least
serving breakfast to them in the morning.
And they throw it back at you, and you're like, "Hey, I'm not the one." Right?
Yeah.
I got expelled too. Right? All right. So you're doing that, and you're getting paid to do that. That's like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. That was a job. And so I lived in Toronto for, I don't know, maybe 6 years or so, and then I moved back to Australia, continued doing the music, and continued working with kids. I worked for the Department of Juvenile Justice with kids in detention centers, and that was actually in real jails. That was pretty intense, yeah. Like
in Australia?
Yeah, kids that had like murdered people, and it was actually a girls' unit, so they were all girls. And
wow.
they'd all done some crazy stuff.
And how are the jails in Australia? I mean, have you been to any jails in New York to compare?
No, actually I haven't, but I should really put that on my bucket list. Do like
You'll have to come back and tell
a
us.
jail crawl.
All right, okay. All right, that's fair.
Maybe that could be my next business. I could offer tourists a jail crawl.
No,
all the
listen,
popular jails.
Nowadays with these reality TV shows, it's so out of pocket. You could probably do that and actually make a lot of money doing that.
I actually watch those shows, but after a certain point in time, those ones where you're like how someone killed somebody and you watch it for a while and you're like, am I kind of weird watching this?
No,
is there something wrong with me?
Like did you hear that? Did you hear that? Like, someone's gonna come in that apartment and kill me. All right, cool. So, all right. we're gonna have to do part 2. We're gonna do like a 2-part series because I feel like we're going on, and I haven't even gotten to like,
the business.
What you've done for the last 20 years, or 17 years. All right, so I guess get us to New York, and then we'll go to part 2.
So moved to Australia. I was there for about two or 3 years, and then I had a company here in the States that offered me to come and do some recordings with them.
Oh, cool.
And so I came to New York to record. Didn't really work out. They did a lot of movies. They did the kids movie.
Okay.
Years ago, and but the type of music I was doing was sort of singer-songwriter, sit in the bath and slash your wrists, women's music, you know, and it didn't jive with this sort of alternative stuff that they were doing.
Okay.
And then one thing led to the next, and I've been here 20 years. But I actually to sort of round it out, I was doing the music. It wasn't really working out, so I decided to get into the real estate industry. And that's when I really found out that I was unemployable.
Okay.
I didn't work well with others.
But so all right, so
and at that point I realized I need to do something
to make
on my own, that I was in control of and that I could do. And I'd done a lot of things, but I didn't really feel that I was proficient enough in music to get into music, and I didn't think that industry, it had become an industry where you didn't really need record labels. People could do stuff on their own. So it was like it was a very small, it's become a small industry for people that might have recording studios and those kind of, because people nowadays, they get their careers going on YouTube.
Right.
So I didn't think I was proficient enough in an instrument to sort of, go and play for other people or whatever. So I was like thinking, what can I do? I wasn't blessed with a family with millions of dollars that would just say,
as like most of the people
here's
who
$1 million,
live in New
go
York
and
City.
start an empire and buy buildings and slap your name on the front. I didn't have that luxury.
Right.
And so the only thing that I knew back to front was the upholstery and working with furniture. And so I decided I would open a small studio. And my idea at that point was to go to estate sales and buy small pieces of furniture, renovate them, and sell them in a store, which I rented a place on Avenue B in Alphabet City. And that business plan lasted for about a month. And then because the space that I had was open to the public, so in the back they could see me working, and in the front I had the store with all the pieces, right. And a guy walked in about a month after I was there, and he said, "Listen, I have a chair at home. Would you mind upholstering it for me?" And I said, "Sure." And within a month I had to hire somebody.
Wow.
Because everybody had a piece that needed to be done.
Everyone has a piece, right? No, I have.
And nobody that I knew in my life had pieces of furniture. I was hanging out with musicians and people that went to bars. Like, not to say that people that have furniture don't go to bars, but you know what I mean,
Right.
And when I was in Australia, I housed my entire apartment from pieces I picked up off the street. Like, I didn't. Who got upholstery done? Who?
Yeah.
But then I found there's a whole other world out there.
Right.
And I think within the first year that I was open, I got a call from Oprah Winfrey's staff, who asked me if I would do some work for them for their magazine. And I was like, yeah, sure. So I did some work for them. Crazy. Of course, that's a whole other story.
Right. So let's get into that story. So we're going. Matthew's going to take us through all of his adventures at the furniture joint and upholstering furniture with all these obviously influential people, right? And so we're going to do part 2 with Matthew. Thanks so much for tuning in for another episode, and see you in part 2.
This podcast was brought to you by 23DB Productions, ID Productions, and One of One Productions. For more information, go to Facebook and Instagram, Unexpected Success with Joy.